Why hello there, it is FrOzenSwipe, and I hope you had a great St. Patrick's Day, and assuming of course you celebrated it properly, you should be experiencing one hell of a hangover right about now. So never fear, I'm going to be here with some interesting facts and figures, because obviously that's what everyone needs to get them through a hangover. You might want to have a full Irish breakfast as well, that often helps as well. But we're going to be looking at some Irish stereotypes, and I feel that probably the most prominent of these, and definitely the one that we're probably most well known for, is the fact that we drink a lot. Well, the idea that every single person in Ireland drinks and we're all drunks and we all get pissed all the time, it's not empirically true. There are actually quite a good few people who don't drink. I would be one of them. You'd expect that from a 17-year-old, but we also do have quite a big problem with underage drinking as well. Like, a lot of people who would be my age would drink, even though you have to be at least 18 before you can purchase alcohol, but still. But we also have what is known as a binge drinking culture, and it's actually fairly prominent in a lot of countries. Ireland in particular, it's the same in Britain as well, and I'm pretty sure Australia, New Zealand, it's quite prominent in a lot of English speaking countries. America as well, but not to the same extent actually. They don't consume as much alcohol per person, just because you have a lot more people who'd abstain from drinking alcohol at all in America. But you'd also have it in some Eastern European countries as well. This idea of binge drinking, the idea of just drinking lots of alcohol really quickly in order to get as drunk as possible, which is a fairly prominent culture, and it's definitely one of the driving forces behind our heavy drinking. But in Ireland, our alcohol consumption is very high. We consume 14.2 litres per capita per year. If you compare that to England, they consume about 10.4 litres per capita per year, and the US actually are a lot lower than they thought they'd be. They're only at 9.4 litres per capita, and like you can see there, Ireland, we're quite high up there. We're not the biggest consumer of alcohol per person, but I mean, it really does vary on what statistics and what studies you look at, because I looked at a wide variety of different sources, and they all seem to conflict with each other as to which country actually consumes the most alcohol. You have a lot of variances in the numbers and things there, but for the most part, we do consume an awful lot of alcohol, and we're definitely up there in the top tier of countries when it comes to alcohol consumption. And also, in Ireland, you would have a lot of people who wouldn't drink, but that makes that high average consumption all the scarier. In France, they have, depending on again on the study, what I have here is that they have the same alcohol consumption of 14.2 litres, but it's different over there. They have a different culture around it. They have a more social drinking culture, whereas we have a binge drinking culture, as I told you before. And you know, if you're in France, this high level of consumption doesn't come from people trying to drink as much as possible in order to get drunk. It's just kind of the done thing. I mean, everyone just kind of has like a glass of wine or two with their meal. It's part of socialising. You're not going out to get completely and utterly shit-faced. But I mean, you know, you'd have a glass of wine with, you know, every meal. Like, I mean, that's, you know, it goes with food, and as a result, actually, while they do consume a lot of alcohol, they don't have alcoholism and drunkenness associated with French people as much as you would say in Ireland, because again, we have that binge drinking culture, and the fact that it's more spread out. Like, pretty much everyone in France drinks, but they drink moderately, whereas in Ireland you either have a lot of people who wouldn't drink, but then you also have a lot of people who drink more in order to drag the average up to where it is. So that number is actually a lot scarier in Ireland, which has a binge drinking culture, as opposed to France, which is a more moderate social drinking culture. The other stereotype that seems to be very common, that I feel is also fairly untrue, is the fact that Irish people seem to be associated with red hair, and the vast majority of people in Ireland don't have red hair. If anything, it should be most associated with Scottish people, because they have 13% of their population have red hair, whereas in Ireland it's 10% of the population. And if you were to contrast this with the US, it's they estimate it to be between 2 and 6%. But when you also take into account the fact that in America you have much more racial diversity than you do in Ireland or in Scotland, and you know, I mean, the reason being is that the vast majority of Irish and Scottish people are Caucasian, and red hair is fairly exclusively a Caucasian trait. So in America, where you have a lot of people of various different races, not just Caucasian people, obviously the overall percentage of people with red hair is going to be lower, but amongst Caucasian people it would still be roughly the same. So there is a bit of truth there, as there is with most stereotypes, but for the most part, not all Irish people have red hair and freckles. I mean, that's just completely false, but there are about 10% of us who do, so there's that. Another stereotype is the fact that we eat nothing but potatoes. There is, again, a grain of truth to this. From a historical point of view, if we go back, say, 170 years or so, this would actually be fairly true, although predominantly amongst rural, lower classes. The reason being is that the land in, say, the west of Ireland was actually quite poor. You couldn't grow a lot of crops there. However, potatoes seemed to thrive in the slightly acidic soil of the west of Ireland. So what you had was a crop that could provide substance. It was very easy to grow, and you could get a lot of food out of relatively small plots of land. So what you had is you had potatoes become a staple crop. And I mean, back then people really did used to live off potatoes. I mean, a standard meal would be a couple of spuds and a pint of milk or something like that. And then obviously for Sunday dinner or something like that, you might have something a bit better. But obviously depending on your social position at the time. This stereotype was probably excelled by the fact that when the potato crop failed in 1845 and you had the potato famine, a lot of people emigrated from Ireland, because obviously we didn't have any fucking food because we had relied so much on the potato crop. So when that failed, we were pretty much screwed. A lot of people didn't have a reliable source of food. A lot of people died of starvation and of disease. A lot emigrated. That was really the first big wave of Irish immigrants to countries like Britain, Australia, the US, Canada, those sort of places. So that most likely is where that stereotype really spawned from. But if you go to today, it's really not the case, because we are now, for one, we are by no means the poor country that we once were. I mean, we were once one of the poorest countries in Europe, and now we are probably one of the wealthiest. We would have been, and then obviously our economy's gone to shit, and well, it depends what you define as wealth, but we're still a developed, wealthy country. But not as much as we would have been, say, 5 years ago with the Celtic Tiger and all the rest of it. But let's leave the economics aside of it. We can afford to import food from all around the world, so we have a much more varied diet now. It's not, we don't have to rely purely on potatoes now. That's most definitely not the case. However, while you can still have, you can have pretty much any food that you'd get anywhere else, but you still kind of see it a little bit. I mean, the standard dinner here in Ireland, well, for me personally anyway, would be your standard meat and 2 veg. You'd have a slice of meat and then you'd have 2 vegetables, and generally speaking, one of those vegetables is going to be potato, whether it be mashed, baked, roast, whatever. And then obviously you'd have whatever peas or carrots or something, turnip, parsnip, whatever on the side. So we don't exclusively eat potatoes. It's still part of kind of our cuisine. I would still have quite a lot of potatoes, but I'd imagine it would be fairly similar in other parts of the world as well. Stemming on from this, also the stereotype that we're all farmers and that we all work on farms. While this would have been true again a while ago, it's definitely not true now. We used to really depend on our agriculture and agricultural exports for our economy. That's not the case anymore. And while we are still one of the biggest exporters of agricultural produce in the EU, we are actually one of the largest exporters of computers and information technology in the world. So you've quite a vast difference there. I mean, going from farmers to computers and technology and that sort of thing. It was American companies coming here and setting up their businesses here that really kickstarted our economy and completely transformed us from one of the poorest countries in Europe to one of the wealthiest. So yeah, I'm sure that's something you probably didn't already know. But one thing that is empirically true that we never seem to be given any sort of recognition for is the fact that we are in fact the largest consumer of tea in Europe. And not only that, we're the 5th largest consumer of tea in the entire world. And it's funny because this idea of drinking tea is associated with Britain for the most part, and per capita Britain consumes 1.9 kilograms of tea per person, whereas in Ireland we consume 3.3 kilograms of tea per person. So we consume nearly twice as much as they do, and yet the stereotype lies with them, which I feel is quite ironic. But I mean, this is definitely something that I do contribute to, as opposed to obviously the drinking and the consumption of alcohol thing. This I heavily contribute to. I mean, I love tea. You gotta love tea. It's just amazing. But I could easily have 3 or 4 cups of tea a day, and that would be minimum, really. I mean, I have one in the morning, one when I come back from school, one after dinner, maybe one before I go to bed. Yeah, I'd have at least 3-4 cups of tea a day. I could easily have more. I could easily have 5 or 6 cups in a day, no problem whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, it's funny that we have all these other stereotypes about us that aren't really true, and then there's this one big glaringly obvious thing that no one seems to pick up on. So, now you know, while we do like our drink, we love our tea. Anyway guys, hope you've enjoyed, hope you maybe learned something today, and I hope that you get over that hangover soon enough. Well, this has been BO2. Hope you've enjoyed, and thanks for watching.